Max Crosby just got a 3-year extension, $35 million a year, roughly averaged out. Although the actual breakdown of the contract hasn't come yet, what the signing bonus is. If you sign Hutch to the same deal, which he might take right now because it's early, if that makes sense, he would get a signing bonus right now and wouldn't have to wait to get his contract extension. You'd have Hutch through 5, 6, 7, 8 years in the NFL, which would probably be his most productive years. And those last 3 years could either be really, really cheap or they could be taxing. They could be, but you're saving money long-term by doing it now. Cutting into this year's cap. Some people want to use the money, like the last texter, to go get Joey Bosa. So let's talk about Joey Bosa. 9-year pro, formerly one of the elite edge rushers in the NFL, wreaked havoc his first 6 years. But the last 3 years have been a disaster. He's 30 years old. In 28 games, 14 sacks isn't terrible, but he's getting paid north of $20 million a season. He finished 2 of the last 3 years on the injured list, and now he's been released. The only reason he would actually be available to the Lions is because he's a risk, an injury risk, an aging injury risk. If he wasn't a risk, A, he wouldn't have been cut, or B, he'd be out of their price range. Is Joey Bosa on a cheaper deal? Because let's face it, I think everybody looks at the Joey Bosa commodity and says, this is a risk. Joey Bosa isn't getting a 3-year, $108 million, $105 million Max Crosby type contract. But would you sign him to a 1-year deal? I don't know, somewhere between 7 and 11 million. I don't even know
yes,
where to. I
don't
even
that,
know.
yes. I just don't know if that's what he's going to do. This is a guy who's made a ton of money in his career, and he's coming off where he had to renegotiate his last deal that ended up paying him $20 million a year for 2 years. He's not worth anywhere near that now because of his track record of being hurt. 3rd year in the league, he got hurt and played 7 games. 2 years after that, he got hurt and played 12 games. Then he finished up with 16 games in 2021 with 10.5 sacks. Great year. That's the last good year he had. The next 2 years, he played 14 games combined. And then he played 14 games last season. And, you know, as you mentioned, the 14 sacks in his last 28 games, it's 14 sacks in 3 years. Okay, it's a 8 to 9 sack season, I guess, if you prorate it. But now you hang another year on him, Doug. Mm-hmm. And it's not like he wasn't playing with people on the other side of him because Khalil Mack was there. So I'm very reluctant to look at anything north of $10 million a season for Joey Bosa. But if he's willing to take a 1 year, make it, earn it deal, yeah. And the Lions are a really good football team. So it might behoove him to go ahead and do that. I don't know what he wants to do with his life. Like I said, he's made a ton of money already. So is winning a championship, is that what's most important now?
So I'm you got to take a risk every once in a while. And the question is Bosa the risk you would take? I would say no. I don't want Joey Bosa to play for the Detroit Lions. And I don't think that Joey Bosa will be worth it in the end. I mean, it's that's not the risk I'm taking. Might be for some people, but that's not the risk I would personally take. I can understand the argument for, because essentially it only makes sense if he's cheap. And if he's not going to accept the cheap deal, then okay, fine, go somewhere else, right?
Yeah, I mean, the health is the biggest concern. I'd have to go back and look at Marcus Davenport and see if he was the same thing with how few games he's played lately.
Yep.
For a guy who can be productive. I mean, Bosa's year he had in 21 was spectacular. He had 10.5 sacks, but he had 7 forced fumbles too. This guy was a menace out there. When he hit the quarterback would release the football. But you're not getting that version of Joey Bosa. Not likely. So I'm interested, but at the right price. Just like same thing with Khalil Mack. I'm interested in Khalil Mack, but I'm not interested in Khalil Mack at like 17, 18, $20 million because that's not worth it. That's where he was at last year.
Khalil Mack, the risk is you're talking about a guy who's 35.
He's over 30, yeah.
Yeah, and so these are guys that typically his production, I mean, hasn't dropped off massively yet.
No, he had a great year a couple of years ago and had a not so great year this past season. I'm a big fan of Khalil Mack, but I'm not going to break the bank to bring him in just because of the player that he was. And he's 34. He just turned 34. So last year he had 6 sacks, but the year before he had 17. The year before he had 8. So that 17 sack total is the first time he was at double digits since the 2018 season. So again, I like Khalil Mack, but I don't like Khalil Mack at some exorbitant number, which is what the Chargers paid for him when I think it was $17 million, and he's played there for the last 3 years. And he had the one awesome year sandwiched by, some average years with an 8 sack season that was 17, then a 6. So I'm not high on either of those guys for anything north of $10 million. No.